Cape Cod is an inspiration for innovation. eSTEAMers will introduce you to the often overlooked entrepreneurs who are building Cape Cod's future with STEAM. Join us on the journey as we discover the makers, the innovators, the educators, and artists who are creating the new economy on the sandbar. Welcome to eSTEAMers. I'm Paula Hersey, and today with me is Greg White, Chief Counsel at the Consumer Affairs and Protection
Business
Regulation for the state of Massachusetts. With all the shopping that you did online this Christmas, we're going to talk a little bit about identity theft and other types of things that are happening with people's identity and fraud. Greg, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So give us a little background. Consumer affairs and business regulation.
Yes.
What is that? There's a lot of things at the state.
A lot going on there. There's a misconception out there. People think Office of Consumer Affairs, that's the Attorney General's office.
Okay.
And it is an important component of the Attorney General's office, the Consumer Protection Bureau. But they're separate and apart from the Office of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation. We're a state agency, and we're a regulatory body for a number of different entities.
Okay.
We have under our umbrella, if you will, we have the Division of Banks. And the Division of Banks basically regulates state-chartered banks and credit unions.
Okay.
They regulate mortgage companies as well as debt collectors, amongst other things. And we have the Division of Insurance, which regulates the health insurance, homeowners insurance, auto insurance,
Okay.
amongst other things. We have the Division of Standards, which is responsible for inspecting fuel pumps to make sure that the quantity and the quality that is being advertised is what's going into your tank. They inspect fuel tanks as well as price scanners at supermarkets and convenience stores. We have the Department of Telecommunications and Cables, which regulates the telecommunication and cable industry. And lastly, we have the Division of Professional Licensures, which is responsible for licensing 375,000 tradespeople in Massachusetts.
Wow. From
veterinarians to psychologists to chiropractors, and they have a pretty broad mandate, if you will. Within our own world, we also have a number of different programs. We have a hotline that's manned by the Northeastern co-op students, and they answer questions from consumers on a daily basis. If they can't provide the answer, they will direct them to the appropriate agency. We oversee the Lemon Law arbitration program. We oversee the Do Not Call list and the data breach, which is part of what we're here to talk about today, as well as the home improvement contractor registration. And that's an important component of the Office of Consumer Affairs. It requires pretty much every home improvement contractor, with a few exceptions. If you do above ground pools or interior painting, you're not required to be registered. But for the most part, if you're doing home improvement contracting, you're required to register with the Office of Consumer Affairs every 2 years. And when you pay your registration fee, you also pay an assessment that goes into the guaranteed fund, which a lot of folks don't know about. And the guaranteed fund is used to protect homeowners if in fact they have been scammed or there's been shoddy work performed by the contractor. Sure. Most contractors out there are doing fantastic work,
right.
But like anything else, there's a few bad apples. And this provides, provided you meet the criteria, to file with the guaranteed fund and recoup up to $10,000 in lost revenue, if you will.
So this particular agency that you're in, if they didn't know where to put it in the state, they gave it to you.
Well,
It seems like a very broad
is.
and diverse, but it all comes back to regulation, business regulations, and then that consumer piece of it. So when we start to talk about what we're here today, the identity and the fraud piece of this, this runs the gamut all the way through.
It does. And interesting that you mentioned that, because 10, 15 years ago, our agency was much broader. We had the Gaming Commission under us. We had Alcohol Beverage Commission under us. So we had about a dozen to 15 agencies. So it's been pared down over the years. But we like to say we were left with the cream of the crop. You know,
well, also the things that you're now doing have risen to the top as well. The
it has.
Theft has gotten huge.
And it's a big concern out there for consumers. We just did a one-day cybersecurity conference in Central Mass, and we had, amongst other individuals, we had the FBI, we had the Secret Service, we had former U.S. Attorney Donald Stern talk to business owners about various threats and how to address those threats. Because when you think about it, we live in a day and age where all our personal information is readily accessible. The agent who did the presentation talked about how by doing a Google search, they could find pretty much anything about myself, probably yourself as well. Right. They could find if you owned a home, how much you paid for it, what's the square footage. They could go on Facebook if they have access to it and find out if you have any children, where they're going to school. And it's just amazing the amount of information that is out there. I began my career as a prosecutor. I spent 15 years. And when I was a young prosecutor, identity theft consisted of someone stealing your wallet and basically taking the information. We had a group called the Nigerian Posse back in the late 80s and early 90s that would come over here. They would assume someone's identity and they would wreak havoc on the individual's credit. Now, people don't even have to leave their homes to gain access. They can be in a different country. It's just amazing the amount of information that is out there and how easily accessible it is.
Let's break it down into some manageable types here. So let's talk about a little bit about the online piece of it first, because people just went through, you know, a mad dash through Amazon for, you know, Christmas and the holidays. What happens online, and how does that affect identity, and how accessible are those things?
Well, you know, part of it is just common sense. You know, people, before we began, we were talking about people using their workplace computers and providing that information. You know, common sense is that you change your password often, and that you don't, it's not confined to 5, 6 digits. Recently, I received an email from my brother who lives in Europe, and he said, you need to change your password, your system's been hacked. So it's great. So I went and I ended up going from a 5-digit password to 6 digits followed by 2 names that can be associated with myself. And I recently ran a half a marathon with my son, and right before the gun went off, I couldn't get on iTunes, so he said, "What's your password?" In the meantime, 10,000 runners go by, and he's still plugging it in. But at the end of the day, it protects my personal information. So a lot of it is just common sense, you know.
Like not having the same password for every single site that you
use. Or your mother's maiden name, which is out there, you know. And so, you know, that's one of the ways we tell people is the best way to protect your information. There's other things. There's, you know, the different scams out there. It's the dumpster divers. That's, you know, people will actually go through.
Do people really do that? Do they dive into the dumpster and get your old credit card statements?
You'd be amazed. People put their.
I've never seen anybody at the Barnstable landfill doing that.
No, because they go into the end of your driveway. You know.
Oh, there you go.
Exactly, and they're retrieving, you know, old tax returns, credit card statements, various pieces of information. And what we suggest to consumers is to invest in a paper shredder. You can get them at Home Depot for a small amount of money. And again, it's another way to protect your identity. The other area of theft that we're seeing a lot more of is through devices called skimmers.
That's scary because you don't know when you've encountered one of those, either at a bank or a gas station or something.
Or just at a mall.
They're hidden.
It's amazing how efficient they have gotten.
And how do they work?
Well, there's a number of ways in which they utilize them. One of the ways is they put them in fuel pumps. And I don't know if you can bring that up, but
we'll add the picture to it.
But that's a picture of a Bluetooth skimmer in a fuel pump. And what they do is they, when the gas station is closed, they'll go in, they'll jimmy the lock, and they'll put the device in. And what happens is you put your credit card in there, and what they're doing is they're capturing that information. The FBI has been investigating this for years, and in the past, our investigators with the Division of Standards, they would go out and inspect the pumps, they would open it up and they'd see this device, and they'd immediately call the local police and the FBI, and they'd come in and they'd set up surveillance. Now they've become very sophisticated. They put these Bluetooth devices in, and now they don't even have to retrieve the device. It's a cost of doing business.
Wirelessly, here's the number.
Here's the information out there.
Wow.
Recently we had a situation up in Quincy in which they had installed a skimmer in one of the ATM machines. What they'll do is they'll put, whatever bank is, they'll put the facade on top of it, and you'll put your credit card, and again, it's basically retrieving your information. And a number of consumers were impacted by that. They also use that at airports, malls, and bus terminals. What they'll do is they'll brush up against you with a skimming device. You don't even know that they're there, and they'll retrieve your information. So we came out with a protective sleeve, and what you do is you put your credit card in there, and it protects the information from being downloaded into the skimmer.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's another area that we recently found out that they were using skimmers on is passports.
That made me think a bit. We were talking about the passport thing, and people just don't realize that there's information embedded in your passport.
There's a chip. Since 2007, they've put a chip in your passport with all your personal information on there, and they will brush up against you and they'll retrieve that information. So they've actually come out with protective sleeves that you put your passport in there. It's just, staying ahead of the game. But as we talked about earlier, it's just amazing what they'll do with this information over a short period of time. The FBI was investigating a situation up in upper state New York in which a mom and pop convenience store and gas station in a high tourist area had been a victim of a skimmer. They had put the device in one of their machines, and it was a group, organized crime out of Eastern Europe. They retrieved the information through a Bluetooth device. They sent it out to 35 countries around the world with the caveat that they weren't to release it until they were given the specific date and time. And when they got the green light, they released it, and within 3 hours, over $35 million was lost.
Wow.
And that's just one little device in a mom and pop store up in upper state New York. So it's just amazing the amount of information. And it's not just convenience stores and gas pumps and ATM machines that are accessible.
Was it Target that had skimmers on it, or something?
Target, I think, was just a victim of a security breach. But over 10 million individuals were impacted by that. OPM, the Office of Personnel Management, which oversees the federal employees, they were a victim of one of the largest security breach involving the federal government. 24 million current and former federal employees had their information compromised. I worked in one of the presidential administrations, and one week this summer I got a letter from my bank, my mortgage company, saying that I had my personal information compromised and telling me what steps to take. That same week I was reading the Boston Globe and learned that all former and current federal employees had their information compromised. So within 1 week, all my information was out there.
And that's still evolving, actually.
It
from
is.
What I hear is that they really just don't know how many people are
right,
affected.
Exactly. And it's just amazing how much
and
information.
it went beyond the information. It was like pictures of children and.
Well, when you are appointed by the president to work as part of his administration, the FBI undergoes a background check.
Sure.
So they're not only getting your information, you're getting your spouse's or your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your siblings, your children's information. So all that information is potentially out there. And it's just amazing what they can do with it. My wife and I are having some work done on our home, and we were talking to the contractor, and one of the individuals who works for him was talking to me about identity theft. And when she learned the office I was with, she said, you know, recently I went to refinance on my home, and I learned that I owned a condominium, and I also leased a brand new, 2015, Ford, whatever. She wasn't aware that her information had even been compromised until she went ahead and tried to refinance. So we advise consumers to take advantage of getting your credit report.
Which are free now.
They are.
One a year?
One a year.
One a year from any of the three
any
top
of the
agents?
three. And if, in fact, you've been a victim of a identity theft, they're required to provide that service.
Okay.
And it's good to know, because at the end of the day, your credit is so important to you. And again, they can wreak havoc without you even knowing it.
So what are the top three scams that you see right now, either via email or phone?
One of the biggest scams, which has been around for quite some time, is the IRS scam. And everyone's heard of it. Someone will call you and they'll say, we're with the IRS. First off, the IRS never calls anyone.
Right.
Good luck getting a hold of anyone.
Right.
But at the end of the day, they will identify themselves being with the Internal Revenue Service, and that you owe back taxes, and that you're going to be criminally prosecuted unless you send X amount of dollars, wire it to a certain location.
Right.
And you'd be shocked at the amount of individuals who just, without checking, they go to the bank, they get the money, and they wire it. And that is, it's very common. I was telling you about before the show, we had an employee of the Office of Consumer Affairs who said her mother had received over half a dozen calls over a 24-hour period from a group pretending to be the IRS. So she gave the information. I gave it to one of our attorneys. They contacted. It turns out that they were operating out of Washington, the state of Washington, and they were belligerent, foul-mouthed. They basically said, "What are you going to do?"
Right.
Until we said, the next call you're going to receive is from the Attorney General's office. At which point the phone call stopped. So the IRS scam is a very common scam.
They're never going to call you.
They're never going to call you, and
and if you owe money,
exactly,
they got other ways of getting a hold of you.
Absolutely. They're very good at what they do, and so
exactly.
So the IRS scam. The other scam that we're seeing a lot of is the fake lottery scam. And again,
now that's been around for a few years. People still falling for that?
There was,
there's $1 million waiting in the bank
exactly.
over in.
And you would be surprised. There was a article in the Boston Globe several weeks ago about a group of individuals, one of which was an older gentleman who basically lost out on $500,000 throughout a period of time. Basically, they contacted him. They said, you had won a lottery in the Caribbean. for $1 million, but you owe taxes in the amount of $5,000 or $10,000. You need to wire it, and when we receive it, we'll send you the money. Well, he received at least 3 different separate emails or contacts from a group pretending to represent this lottery. At which point, someone else contacted him and said, you know, we've been made aware of the fact that you've been awarded these 3 lotteries. By international law, you can't collect more than one in 1 year unless you join our network. You're going to have to pay a fee, and then you can receive the total amount. And this individual spent over $500,000. So again, you know,
if it sounds too good,
exactly,
it's too good to be true.
Or hang up and call them back. You know.
Sure.
The other is the grandparent scam that we see a lot of. Again, going back to what we were saying earlier about all your personal information being readily accessible. We've gotten calls from individuals, grandparents especially. They'll go online, they'll find out that you have a granddaughter or grandson, that they're studying abroad in Paris or London, what school they're going to, who they're over doing the program with, and they'll contact them, usually late at night, and they'll say, listen, your grandson, we represent such and such entity, your grandson has been arrested. His bond has been set at $5,000. If you don't wire that money immediately, he's going to be transferred to a more secure facility. And they panic. They run to the bank, they wire it, and lo and behold, it turns out it's just that. It's a scam. Lastly, the one thing that we're seeing that I wasn't even familiar with is called One Ring. Have you heard of that?
I don't think so, no.
What it is,
I'm usually pretty good on the cybersecurity kind of stuff, so One Ring.
What it is you'll get a call on your cell phone, and it'll ring once. And so, like everyone, you want to know who's calling.
They did that with landlines a few years ago, and it was actually originating out of jails, wasn't it?
Well, these calls are originating out of the Caribbean countries, and they will call your cell phone, and immediately, if you don't pick up, you'll see that you missed a call. You don't recognize the number. You want to know who's calling you. So you'll dial it, and what they'll do is they'll keep you on as long as they can, and the longer they have you on, they bring up the bill. I don't know how they're connected into the to the networks or what have you. And I got a call at work, and I ended up calling them back, and then I asked one of the attorneys. I said, I just got the strangest thing. I got a phone call, and I missed it, and I called him back, and he goes, oh, that's the One Ring scam. And I said, well, send out an email throughout the office alerting people of this.
So I'm thinking if they don't leave voicemail, I'm not calling them
Exactly.
back.
And if or Google the area code, and if it doesn't come up, one of the Massachusetts ones, you're probably a victim of the
There's actually, if you do Google phone numbers, there are a number of sites out there that are tracking phone numbers.
They can do the reverse.
Reverse phone numbers, and they'll tell you that it's a scam phone number or something.
Exactly. So, I mean, again, when in doubt, use common sense, and that's what we advise the consumers out there. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. Protect your information, because at the end of the day, it's a lot more of a hassle to go ahead and get this information off of your credit report than it is by, changing your password, investing in a paper shredder, using a protective sleeve. So those are just basic ways in which you can protect your information.
That's excellent. So with the basics of protecting your information, let's talk about worst case scenario, Greg. I've been hacked. I'm chaos. My heart's dropped.
Yep.
What do I do first?
Well, the first thing you do is you check your first thing you do is you cancel your credit card.
Okay.
You know.
Do I call the police?
Well, that is advisable.
Okay.
You know, but again,
It's
you know,
after
it
the
could
fact.
it could come from anywhere. It's,
Sure.
You know, I was on one of the local cable shows, and the police chief, and I think I was sharing with you, and I handed
Held up
him,
your number.
and he actually pulled out my credit card and held it up to the camera. And when we went to a break, I said, by the way, that was my real credit card. The chief told me that they get dozens of calls a day, and you know, to the extent that they can be helpful, they're certain they'll take a report and they'll track it down.
Sure.
But again, this perpetrator could be halfway around the world.
Sure.
So you know, you cancel your credit cards, you check your credit report, you put a freeze on your credit. You know,
Okay.
all things that at the end of the day can help protect how they're going to utilize this information.
Right.
You know, most of the time, that information, before you're even made aware of the fact that you've been victim of a security breach, has already been utilized. You know, if it's something as simple as, you know, you dropped your wallet and your credit card's out there, if the right person doesn't pick it up and it gets into the wrong hands, that person can ring up $500 in gift cards and gas payments before you're even aware that the information is missing. So, you know, we do advise to contact the local police department, but again, their hands are tied to a certain extent. But there are ways in which you can take steps on your own, canceling your credit card, getting a credit report, putting a security freeze on, all ways to help ensure that your exposure is limited.
Right. You have a website for the state that would give you some of that resources and information?
Yes, we do.
There you go.
It's www.mass.gov/consumer, and we maintain a hotline,
Yep.
and the Boston number is 617-973-8787. Our toll-free number is 888-283-3757.
Okay.
So it's
Excellent. We'll have that up on the screen for
Sure.
folks to see.
Yeah.
It was wonderful to talk to you. There's just, it's scary out there, but as you said, common sense.
Exactly.
You know, it's not any different than dropping your
Yeah.
wallet.
Right.
You know, if you maintain good password hygiene,
Absolutely.
which is what
Yeah.
we've called it in the tech industry
Right.
for years, is, you know, maintain good hygiene on your personal information. You know, don't overshare on
Yep.
Facebook.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And on your social networks. And then, you know, really kind of just listen. Make sure that you're thinking before you're acting.
Absolutely. I mean, short of going back to the dark ages, which we talked about earlier, where
Right.
you're just using cash. You don't have a computer. You know, and you're not going to be able to function out there. So it's and unfortunately, as soon as we identify a threat, they're on to the next one. You know, they have a lot of time on their hand, and they're very sophisticated, but there are resources out there, and again, at the end of the day, using common sense is the best approach.
Well, thanks for coming
Well,
to
thank
the
you for
Cape in
having
the
me.
winter.
No,
Sorry we didn't do this in July.
I appreciate it. You know, if it was August, I could have made a weekend of,
A week of it,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Thanks,
So,
Greg. I
well,
appreciate it.
And thanks for having me.
I'm Paula Hersey, and this is eSTEAMers. you.